Okay, it's just started recording. Well, welcome to today's session. And well, I was sort of thinking about subject matter, and I've done this type of lesson before with birds, and I've been into colored pencils. So I was really like struggling with subject matter, and I pulled out an artwork that I'd done last year, and it was a moth. And I just thought it's such a lovely subject matter because you don't really have to deal with that much color. You can actually just focus on values. So it's quite an easy object to draw, and it's not as complex as a butterfly. But I'm just going to go through the slideshow very quickly. Okay, let me just move the slides. So this particular artist, Abby Diamond, I found her piece and I thought this was really inspirational, and this is where I really want to go. And sort of that splashy, loose watercolor effect, but with the colored medium, the colored pencils, or the neo colors, and then working into it either with colored pencils or pen. And I became quite interested in the moth symbolism, and moths do represent change and transformation and growth, which is really lovely as artists. But many cultures do see moths as symbols of death, and other people believe that moths symbolize intuition and encourage you to trust your inner wisdom, which is really wonderful for us as artists. I'm just going to change the slide. And then as I was doing research, I found these amazing moths. I've never seen anything like this. And seemingly this moth you can find in North America. So I did not think for one moment that you could actually get a moth that color. And then I found this one, and I just loved the description. So it's all like sort of glittery. And I mean, it might be at some stage wonderful to actually include glittery media and to do a moth like this. But this is the diva moth. And then, okay, my computer's just done something strange. Let me go to the next. I'm actually just going to move my computer slightly out. The next moth is the fuzzy bunny moth. And I mean, also this like sort of hairy with these long bunny ears, so quite strange looking moths. And I did a little bit of research in art history, and I found some very like sort of academic drawings of moths, and they weren't that interesting. But then I found this one by Vincent van Gogh, and he's done this great peacock moth. So quite interesting that, and he's one of my favorite artists. I loved finding this work. And then this is really inspirational. So this is April Capini. So we're probably not going to go as dark as her, but what I love about her work is that behind the moth, you can almost see these like sort of lines where she's sort of been drawing, and she erases it to a certain extent, but it's got like this sort of drippy feel about it, and it's got like this feathery feel, which is quite beautiful. And these again, very inspirational. You know, it almost looks like she's not trying to get a perfect line. She's almost drawing, and then she's feeling where the line must go, and she's repeating the lines, and it almost gives it that feeling that it's like sort of fluttering, which is really quite beautiful. Both of those artworks, the one on the left-hand side, I love that sort of almost like lines dribbling down from it as well. That's really quite beautiful. And this is one of her works as well, another moth, a little bit lighter than the last ones. And I mean, I also love that background. So she's worked on the moth, and then she's smudged. Okay, we're not working in charcoal, but really beautiful drawing. And then these two as well. And you know that on the right-hand side especially, I mean, it looks like these moths are like sort of fluttering and moving, and they've left these trails behind them. And I mean, I don't think I'm going to get that right today, but you know, it would be wonderful to get that sort of sense of feeling of movement almost in the moths, if we can get that. And then I quite like this one as well, where she's starting to work into the negative space. We might find some time to do that, but really, really lovely drawing. And again, another moth. So really wonderful, wonderful pieces. She does beautiful nature studies as well. So, I mean, if you are interested in her work, She does foxes and she does bunnies and all sorts of animals. And I'm just going to change cameras. So I was originally going to work with this camera, so I'm just going to change it to my document camera. And hopefully everything's going to be in focus. So I'm going to try and close this down and then focus on the document camera. Sharon, can you just give me a thumbs up if it's in focus? Okay, perfect. So these are the pieces I played around with. And what I did is, this is just a normal water-soluble pencil. So I've got a really tiny pencil on this pencil holder, and this is just a Faber-Castell, and it's water-soluble. Hang on, I'm telling lies. This one's the water-soluble pencil. This one is the Inktense, and it's on, this is not hot press, this is cold press paper, so it's typical watercolor paper. And then this is the Aquatone. I'm not sure if you've got any of the Aquatones, but those are quite similar to the Inktense pencils, and they look like that. So they're a little bit thicker, so they'll make more bold marks. And I think a nice substitute for these is the Neo colors. So I think these would behave in a very similar way. So either of these is absolutely perfect. And then what I did is I used Kitty's markers. Sharon, I'm not sure if you've got any Kitty's markers. No. Okay, so I can avoid that one. But it really is, it's quite, and when I said inexpensive, let me just show, I'll jump up for 2 seconds and grab them. So they look like this, and they're these really inexpensive ones you can get from supermarkets, you know, or any art supply store. And they really are the ones that the kids use at school. And they're wonderfully water soluble, so they make some really, really interesting marks on a surface. And then I did one in charcoal. So I did charcoal and then worked into it with the colored pencil. So the charcoal's quite nice if you've got a stick of charcoal to play around with that as well. Okay, but I think what we'll do is we'll start with this one, the brown one. And I mean, I was just drawn to it because of, I mean, it's got like almost like these wings with the ends that look almost like quite drippy, and I loved that shadow as well. So maybe what we can do is we can just start drawing very loosely. And if you have got, I'm going to shift from, I've got, that's cold press, that's normal watercolor paper. And then I've got a hot press, and I know it's difficult to see on camera, but you'll probably see the difference once I start drawing. And then I primed some craft card. So I've got craft card like that. So even if you haven't got craft card, it's not a big deal, but it might be quite nice for you to see what it looks like when I draw on the craft card. So I'm going to put that aside, and I've just got a little bit of normal cold press paper, and I think I'm going to start with that. Okay, so if you've got a sketchbook or some paper or whatever, I mean, it doesn't matter. You know, I think the thing is to start experimenting with, I'm just making sure that this is in the middle, to start experimenting with different surfaces and see what suits you. I'm just going to try and prop this up as well so that we can, okay, I think I'm going to put my phone underneath so it props it up and you can actually see the reference. So I've got my little phone there, and I'll start drawing. Oh, excuse me, I'm still suffering from a bit of the cold that I had over the last 2 weeks. So very loosely, I'm just going to start with, in fact, I'm going to start with the middle of that insect and just sort of little circles for the head I'm going to, and I'm really, if you have a look at my hand, I'm holding that pencil quite far back, and I'm just trying to feel my way around that insect. So the first drawing is just going to loosen up, and anyway, we are going to add water to it. So everything hopefully is going to become quite drippy. So all you are doing is just depositing pigment and just trying to feel your way around that. I probably got the proportions wrong, but I'm not too worried about that because we can always draw into it. I am going to deposit a little bit more pigment from this pencil into the center part of this. And it's got that little segmented body, but always start loose and try and just feel your way around that insect. And this type of drawing, or this approach to drawing, also it gives you a little bit of confidence when you're starting out. I often find whenever I started drawing, and especially drawing in front of people, I get a little bit nervous, and it takes me a while to just relax and get into the drawing. So this sort of loose, scribbly start is quite forgiving. So I'm going to indicate those feelers. And just enjoy those shapes. So I am observing, but I'm not worried too much about getting an exact. And if the wings go off, that's fine as well. I should have actually planned mine. But the next one, so the next butterfly we do, I can perhaps plan a little bit more carefully. This is quite a small piece of paper. And so now what I'm doing is I'm just picking up a very big brush, and I'm just going to dip it into water, and I'm just going to let it all drip. And I suggested having a little bit of paper towel. And I'm already loving the combination of the very dry mark against the initial marks, and then against this like sort of drippy mark that I've just started working. And it might be quite nice to work into this while it's wet. So your pencil, your colored pencil, or your water-soluble pencil is going to actually start making a very different mark to the initial drawing that you've done. So now you can actually like sort of start to focus in. And I'm putting that sort of center section in. And if you find it's getting too dry, you can just add more water in. I mean, the other thing you can do is you could dip your, if you want to, you could actually dip your pencil into, my pencil's becoming very blunt. You can dip the pencil into the water and see what type of mark that gives you. So I'm just sharpening my pencil a little bit because it's gone extremely blunt. And I've just dipped it into the water and it's giving me another type of mark. And it's gone quite dry on this side. So I think what I'll do is also just add a little bit more water in there. And I am sort of trying to look where the values are. And this insect is quite dark in the middle. But we can go in and darken that later. And it's got this light band that runs down. And I am working on a board that is set at an angle, but I mean, you can also lift up your drawing from time to time and let the colored pencil or the water drip. It's quite nice to actually work vertically when you are drawing. It does give you a better perspective. So maybe that's something to experiment with. Oh goodness, I've just had a huge big moth fly into my studio. So it's obviously the right thing to be drawing today. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that one aside, and I'm going to let it dry a bit, and then I'm going to start a different one. And I'm going to pick up a different medium. So I'll put that aside. And I think this time I might try a different paper to just see what it's going to do. So I picked up, and then so you'll either pick up your neo colors, or I'll pick up the aquatone. So I'm just going to change. In fact, no, I'm not. So what I'll do is I'll go with the Inktense first, and then the third drawing I'll return back to that aquatone. So I'm picking up my Inktense, and I'm probably going to go with I get drawn towards blues and greens, and I think that I'm probably going to do this one next. So I might turn my paper sideways and then work with this moth. And I'm probably going to work in maybe an olive, or I think maybe an olive. So I'm not worrying, or maybe another green. I might just do a whole series of green moths. I'm not worrying about realism or naturalism. I'm just going to work with whatever colors I feel like working. So if you've got a favorite color, I mean, I wouldn't go for anything too bright right now because the moths are quite dull, most of them. Well, not the ones that we looked at right at the beginning of my slideshow, but many of them are quite dull. So I'm just sharpening my pencils a little bit, just so that when I start drawing, I've got quite a nice. So I'm going to try and be a little bit more careful about placement. And I'm going to try and get that whole moth in. Trying to get the proportions a little bit more accurate, but also keeping it quite loose to start off with. Because as you work into it, it is going to change. So just a little scribbly mark. I'm trying to capture that. It's got like sort of a hairy front part of its body. I remember at school, I did biology, so I did study all the different parts. But I can't remember what that top part's called. Probably thorax. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm just getting those little segments in. And then again, just focusing on the value. So, I mean, I have put outlines in, but the outlines will probably disappear as I work, or they'll soften. So I'm more interested in sort of getting a fluttery, soft feeling in this moth as I'm working, and just playing with that, these colored pencils, and sort of just scribbling and creating interesting marks, moving. I mean, hold the pencil in different ways, you know, sort of hold it like a pen, and then maybe change your grip, and you know, and sort of move it upright, and just see what marks you can make as you are drawing, and just relax into that drawing. But a tendency to always work on the right instead of working on the left, and I should actually do it the other way around. I think it is just because I'm right-handed. Just going to try and see if I can get those spots more or less in the same. And again, I'm not really too worried about this initial drawing at all, because the water is going to do strange things to it, and then you're going to go over it with possibly pen or the Poscas, and that's going to alter it again. So all I'm trying to do is just to get some pigment down and some value down. Excuse me. And sort of looking at some of the proportions of this bird. It's got this wonderful wiggly line. I might actually try and put something like that in. Maybe on the other side, it's also got, I'm looking at this wonderful, put that in quite strong. And then if you want to, you could possibly put some of these sharp lines in. And I think I'm probably about ready to start going with the water. I'm not sure if this little dude is longer than. Okay, the proportions aren't bad there. Okay, so I've got my big brush again. Oof, this color is beautiful. Yeah, these Inktense are incredible. They really are awesome colored pencils. And I'm purposely using a big brush so that I'm not going to get too finicky with painting into it. Oh, and I'm loving the drips. I do like drippy, drippy. And then I'm going to do the same thing, I think, that I did with the previous one. And I'm going to go in and maybe just while it's wet, put some more marks in. And the pigment's really going to get deposited now onto that surface. Wow, what a difference. So compared to my normal, so I think I was working with a Stabilo Aquacolor, and the shift to the Inktense is absolutely incredible. So, I mean, it is wonderful to haul out all your wet media and play around with it and see what it does. You know, I haven't touched these water-soluble colored pencils in absolute ages. And once you start seeing these effects, you sort of wonder why you haven't. And if you have worked an area too dark, you should at this stage be able to take a little bit of kitchen towel. So if I decided I wanted that white, these spots on this moth, yes, so you'll see that it's doing that. So I can actually put some water in. I can take my kitchen towel and I can lift some of that pigment out. And it is making it whiter, or lighter at least. It might not go completely white, but it will lighten areas for me. Okay, and I think I'm going to put this one aside and then move to another moth and let that one dry. My first one hasn't dried yet, so I'm hoping it's going to dry soon, and then we can start working into those ones. So I'm just putting the second one aside, and we can start a third one. So the third one, I think either in charcoal or the neo colors or something a little bit wider. Sharon, I'm just going to unmute you. Let's just see if I can unmute you. Hang on.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I've just muted you again. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Sharon, what would you like to do? Do you want to work with the neo color or charcoal?
Well, I just did the first one with Inktense. I just did that one with neo color. I think I'm going to try charcoal, but
okay.
I think I'm going to go to a different paper, because more of a mixed media paper.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to shift to another moth. I think we'll do this little green one, and And I might use the craft card. So the craft card, what I do is I take a roller and I just dip it in a little bit of acrylic paint, and then I roll over the surface, and I prime a whole lot like this. And then what actually happens is the materials behave differently on the acrylic to what they do on the craft card, and you sometimes get quite interesting effects. I'm hoping that it's going to look interesting today, but let's get going with the charcoal. So I did my initial charcoal one just on, I think this is a cold press paper. So the charcoal is also quite nice. I've got a charcoal pencil that I'm going to work with. And yeah, so the same approach, working quite loosely. So charcoal and graphite respond to water as well. And charcoal more than graphite. I think graphite actually responds less, but you can make up your own water-soluble graphite. You can sandpaper it and put it into a jar, and then you can almost use it like paint. So that's quite interesting, an interesting technique to do as well. But so I'm just using this is a woodless charcoal. I'm only using it just because it's got a plastic coating, and it just keeps my hands a little bit cleaner than using normal charcoal. But you can also get charcoal holders very similar to the pencil holders. So the pencil holders that look like this, you can get charcoal holders for them as well. So yeah, that's quite an interesting thing to use. I've just bought a whole lot for my students at school because the kids were complaining about their hands getting dirty. So I invested in a whole lot of those charcoal holders. And this little guy, you can just see the one little foot, I think, emerging from behind the wings. And I'm sort of going to try and imitate that pattern. It's almost like a zigzag pattern that's going across that moth's wings. And then the base is a bit blurry, but I'm not too worried about that because you can still sort of get the shape in. This week has been a little bit crazy at work. We are 1 week away from mid-year exams. So this is our last teaching week. And I think the kids and the teachers are feeling the pressure. So the teachers are a bit pressurized to try and finish all their work. And the kids are starting to, just get stressed because they've got all the learning to do. So there's been quite a lot of tearful people at school today. So I've spent a lot of my time today handing out tissues. Because we've had kids that have been quite emotional and they're starting to fight with one another as well. So they're getting easily I think because they're feeling so vulnerable, if anyone says something, they are taking offense and fighting with one another. So I'm going to be very happy when this week is finally over at school. And I'm very grateful that I have art, because this is the calming, happy place. And I can forget about the kids for a little while and their problems, and just focus on drawing and observing. And then the same thing, picking up the brush and running it down, and you'll see that charcoal does leak. And I think depending on what paper you've used, and then if you draw into it again, also quite interesting that it becomes quite liquid, and it is going to make a different mark. And it almost behaves like paint. Actually, it's quite wonderful. The other thing I've done with charcoal is I've put clear gesso over charcoal, and it makes the most wonderful surface as well. It also dilutes the charcoal, but it gives you almost like quite a gritty surface. So that's another interesting technique to try out. If I am very unhappy with my work, I often I will just add water to it, a charcoal drawing, and then blur everything, and then go in and work again. I'm just going to spread that charcoal right. Oops, okay, I think I've gone a little bit wild. I'm just going to make some streaks that go right across. Just wanted to see what it would do. But I think I might have gone a little bit too crazy here. I didn't mean to actually completely obliterate that hair. So maybe be careful in that section, but it might end up being quite interesting. So I'm going to maybe add a little bit of water there. And it'll be interesting to see if I can mop up some areas. Yeah, and it's behaving very much like the colored pencils. Yeah, and I'm mopping up quite big areas of that charcoal, which is quite interesting. I think I'm going to leave this. And then maybe one more drawing, and then I'm just worried about the time. But I think we've got time to work up one or two of the drawings. I'm not happy with that head. I might just go in and completely wipe it away. I'll try and draw it in again. I think I'm filling enough. So I'm going to leave this in, let it dry, and then come back to it. Okay. One more. And then we can return to the original. So I think I'm picking up, and I'm going to do a different orientation. I think I'm going to go vertical. And I picked up, this is the cold press paper. I'll move it so you can see it. And I think I might do this very unusual looking bug. And I think this, I found it on a free site. I'm just having a look to see if you can see it. Yes. So I found this bug on a free site, and I think it's computer generated, but it's quite interesting. It's really interesting, and it's meant to be a moth. So yeah, it's just got some interesting shapes. It might be difficult to draw, but we can always come back to that. And I think this time I'm going to maybe use I might actually use the kiddies markers, and then maybe a combination of the Neo color, and I might mix so whatever you've got, you can maybe try a mixture of things this time. So I'm going to, I think it'll be quite nice for you to see how the kiddies markers work. And because this guy is mainly blue, I'm picking up a blue marker, and exact same approach. So getting the little head in, the wings in. But I think with this, I am going to add other media in and just mix it up a bit and see what happens. This one is a little bit more complex, but we can simplify it. I'm just feeling those shapes because they are all going to dissolve. Excuse me. I think they have made these wings too short. And I'm not really, I didn't realize I was doing it, but I'm not really picking up my tool much. I'm just sort of moving from one area to the next instead of constantly picking up. So it's almost making like a web of marks. And hopefully this is going to look interesting once we go with the water. So I think I'm going to pick up a little bit of that Aquatone and maybe a little bit of the Neo color. So I'm just going to make a few marks with this, and you could do something equivalent. So you can see this has got a lot more. It's very much like the Neo color. It's almost like quite thick, like Kitty's crayon, except it's water soluble. And I think this is going to look very interesting with the combination of the media. I discovered these kiddies markers, and I realized that they were water soluble when we were in lockdown. And many of my students obviously couldn't, well, they couldn't get art equipment. I mean, they couldn't really go to the shops, or, a lot of places were actually shut. And in our country, I mean, we couldn't even get clothing. I think it was just sort of supermarkets that were open. And most of the kids had these inexpensive markers, and they used them like paint. So that was a huge, big breakthrough for me at that time. And it allowed the kids to still make art. So they did, our school's an iPad school, so the kids have got access to iPads, but at that time period, I think everyone got sick of looking at computers. So it was quite nice to get them to do something that was with real materials. I mean, those poor kids were sitting staring at computers for hours and hours and hours each day. So it was wonderful to just give them instruction and let them get on with it. And I think we forget we don't have to have like incredibly expensive materials. Sometimes these really inexpensive materials can have incredible effects. So I've just picked up the Neo color, and I'm just going to add a little bit into areas. Oh, this is really creamy. So this stuff is wonderful. I'm a bit worried that it's going to be completely overwhelmed things, but we'll see. Okay. I actually like this bug the way it is. But anyway, I'm going to take it further. And then the same process. And it is quite interesting. You'll see that the kitty's marker is completely dissolving. And it seems like the Neo color and the Aquatone colored pencils are a much stronger pigment. And all those initial lines that I drew are almost disappearing, which is quite interesting. Yeah, I'm loving that dripping. It's really, really beautiful. Okay, I think it's time to start working into one of them. So look for one that's dry. So I think this first one of mine has dry. There's just a little drip. Oh, and I'm really loving the marks that have dripped down that insect. So I'm just going to quickly put on my dryer, and I'm going to try and get rid of all the wet. And I'm hoping it's not making too much noise. Yeah, and I think that's enough for me to draw into it. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the kitchen towel. Normally what I would do if I worked with a technique like this, I would let it dry overnight. And then the next morning, I would come and work into it. But this is probably, yeah, I think it's dry enough to carry on. So I'm just going to change my reference again. And I'm going to go back to my original reference, and I'm going to start drawing into this with, so what you could do at this stage, you could either go back to your charcoal, you could work into it with charcoal, you could work into it with your colored pencil again. And these Stabilo oils are wonderful. I mean, they make some very dark marks. They can be a little bit too dramatic. So the Stabilo oils are nice, and they're also water soluble, so I could paint into this. But these are incredibly dramatic. So instead of that, you could also work with your charcoal, or you could work with any type of marker. So if you've got a black, so instead of the Stabilo, all of you haven't got, because this is just basically a water-based colored pencil. So I think what I'll do is I'll do the body in this, and then I'll work into the wings so you can see all the different media. And there's some interesting things happening in this, like there's a strange, like sort of shape that I didn't draw, it just appeared in the artwork. And when I see things like that happening, I often, I don't really want to get rid of it. So I might just use that little shape and draw on either side of it, or exaggerate it. And in the end, a reference is just a reference. It's there to give you information. And I mean, this moth is going to look moth-like in the end, but no one's going to say to me, oh, that moth hasn't got a strange, like, sort of little shape in the middle. They'll probably just accept the drawing for what it is. So I'm going to shift to the pens. And these Faber-Castells are really my favorite pens. I do love them. You get them in different shades. So they make it easy for you to draw. I have two sets of them. I've got one set at home, and I have a set at school. And you do get a lighter one than this. And I think I've left the lighter one at school. But this is fun. It's allowing me to put some values down. It just is very thin, and I think what I want to do is make the center part of that moth quite dramatic. So I really do think I'm going to shift back to the Stabilo oil and try and get this really dramatic and dark. I mean, you could also do it with a darker blue if you don't want to go with the black. I might actually start working different blues into this piece. And as I'm looking at this piece, I'm looking a little bit more carefully at the delicacy and the transparency of these these wings. And there's this strange, like, sort of little pattern that runs through them as well. So I might actually try and draw that, but that might need a finer tool when I get to that part. But I'm just going to try and get all this value going first and get that drama going in this insect, and then I'll draw over the surface again. And then just remember, if anything becomes too dark, then you can just mop it with your paper towel. I've also just zoomed out and I'm looking at it again. And I'm looking at where the darkest areas are. And it's around the little body of that creature. And then it's parts of the wings. I'm not sure if I want to, I might put a little bit more black in some parts, but I don't think I want the whole thing to go black. I've just picked up a pencil that's not water soluble, but it's fine. I think it's going to give me a different mark. And these drips that are coming down, I'm actually pretending that it's part of these wings. And I'm just going in and sort of outlining them a bit. And I think I'm going to look for a different blue and work it into this. Just trying to figure out what blue. Actually, I did use this in Inktense, I think. Oh no, it's a different color. So this is more like a greeny color. So this should be a lot more dramatic than, because I think I used just a normal water soluble pencil when I first started on this drawing. So this Inktense should be quite dramatic once I add a little bit of water into it. Yeah, it is quite dramatic. And I am really putting a lot of water into it, and I'm going to let it all drip as well. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. Just work a little bit more of this. This is a teal green Inktense. And then just working some more values on the outside of that wing. So there's almost like 1, 2, 3, 4 stripes that run vertically down this moth. And then being quite generous with that water again. The only thing is once you start going wild with the water, it becomes difficult to draw into it. So I think you either put this aside and work into a second one, or dry it with the hairdryer. I am just going to pull out my jelly rolls, and I should be able to add some detail into this head. So I would go in. I'm just worried about this being very wet. And I would add little white details, and probably on the top of the wings, but I think this is very wet. And you could do it either with the jelly rolls or the Poscas. The Poscas will work as well. But I think this might be best once everything's dry. And it looks like the Poscas going in, and it's making, so I mean, another thing to do is to actually spray it with fixative and then work into it again. I think this is just getting very wet. So I think what I'm going to do now is just try and dry it very quickly. Yeah, I think that's dried everything, so I'll be able to work into it again. And just for some drama, I think I'm going to pick up my markers, and you could either pick up your fine liners, which should be, they're not water soluble. And then I suggested the Pentel brush pen, which is water soluble. So you've actually just got to be careful. It's a beautiful pen, but if you are working water over it again, it's going to, so it will give you lovely marks. And it behaves very much like a paintbrush. But if you were going to work more water over it, it might actually be an issue. So you just need to think a little bit ahead and work out what you're going to do. If you use your fine liners, actually, I think these Fudenosuke pens are also water soluble. So I think you've just got to be careful. Yes, it says water-based pigment ink. So once I start putting them down, I just need to be careful if I'm going to paint over them. So it might actually be better to go with either a Posca or a fine liner, because a fine liner is definitely not water-based. And with this style of drawing, you can just keep layering. Until you get the detail that you want in the end. Yeah, I think I might put that one aside and work in a second one, and maybe work with a bit of charcoal. And I'm just keeping a watch on the time. So this one has, it's got a splodge that's very wet. So I think what I'm going to do is just dry that with a bit of tissue, and then it should be dry enough for me to draw on it. Oops. Okay, I'm just looking for that reference. Okay, there it is. And I think I'm going to grab the charcoal and work over this in charcoal. Well, it's quite interesting. The charcoal doesn't like what's underneath. So maybe the charcoal wasn't a good idea. Yeah, the charcoal's not liking whatever I put underneath. I am getting some soft marks, but it's generally, I can feel it rejecting what's, yeah, it's not going to like this. And I think this was the Inktense. So obviously the charcoal doesn't like going over the Inktense. Unless I need to just sharpen my charcoal, or the tip of it might have got polluted with something. No, it's not liking it. It's still rejecting it. So I'm going to have to shift to another medium. And maybe I should just pick up a dark Inktense and work into, so I picked up an indigo. I'm just working more detail into this. And I'm just going to sharpen up. Oh. If you had to see the state of my desk is crazy at the moment. I've got materials everywhere. And I keep losing my sharpener. Okay, so I'm just sharpening my pencil. Yeah, much better. Oops. Sharpened a bit too much, and I've got the points breaking now. And just working up the values and the detail of this. This moth has got quite a strange spot. It's got the spot almost, it looks like a teardrop. And the top part of the wing also looks a bit, it was not quite teardroppy as the bottom ones. Or they look a bit like commas. But they have got strange, like little points on them. I think I'm going to work a little bit more water into that again. And this Inktense really is beautiful. And this indigo is working very well with the original, I think it was an olive green I used. And I am wetting the surface a little bit, and I think I'm going to go into it with, while the surface is wet, and make some bold marks. I'll do the same on the other side. And I want to work some of those lines in, but I almost think that this needs to be a little bit more dry. Maybe I can suggest a few right now. And I think because it's got a drip going down the one side on my piece, I think I wouldn't mind, you know, maybe suggesting just actually adding some more water and putting a drip going down so that one drip doesn't look too strange. But I might have to go back to that original color. And no, it wasn't teal green. Okay, I've just added a whole lot of teal green in that. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of teal green on the other side, just so it looks like I haven't made a mistake, that I've done it on purpose. It was an olive green, and there I found it. So I'm just going to drop a little bit in there and add some water in. And I think these spots I'd eventually like to make them quite white and maybe work into them with the Poscas. But I think I've really polluted my Poscas. And I'll use this bit of card and try and clean them. Yeah, I have. My Poscas are not white anymore. And then I'll probably go in and put some highlights in. So these little spots are dry enough. Sharon, I think I'm going to stop there and just see what you've been doing. So I'm just going to unmute you and
there we go.
And just to
I,
see what you've done. Yeah.
okay. This was the first one. Can you see that? There we go.
Yes, I can see it. Yeah. And that was was that in the
That was the Inktense.
tense? Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I really kind of got lost, I think, on these, trying to figure out how to get the texture initially, but then
Okay.
realized going back in that I could add to it.
Yeah.
Because I really initially got lost on this one.
Okay. Yeah, but I think that one's worked out quite well.
Yeah, after I went back in, because
Okay.
I lost the white line.
Okay.
And I lost, when I did the water, I lost the white on the spots.
Okay.
So going back in with the Poscas
It's made a difference. Yeah, it definitely has.
brought it back. Yeah.
I
But I
like
like,
that
yeah.
dot line that you've done as well. That's a lovely, you've done like a little dotted line on
Oh,
the,
with
that's lovely.
with this
Yes.
one? Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I ended up liking this one a lot more than I thought I would initially. But yeah, and then the third one, I like this one. I haven't gone back on it a lot, but I saw what you were doing with the water, and this was my charcoal one.
oh yes, yeah, the charcoal is amazing. Yeah, it's lovely. I think I'm
Yeah,
going to return to that one as well and draw into it. I'm not
I'm
sure
gonna,
how.
yeah.
Yeah, it is fairly dry. So I mean, this one might be quite nice to actually draw into now.
The fourth one was a complete disaster because I did a little, I have those Sharpie markers that are alcohol but water based. So I
Okay.
thought, oh, okay, maybe I could push it around. Well,
Yeah.
you can if you do it right after you make the mark. But I didn't realize that, so I did this, and then I couldn't push it around. So
Okay.
something learned, but yeah, I like I like the other three. I like the other three. And I'm
Yes.
gonna
Yeah.
go back on the charcoal one, I think, and do some
Yeah.
more with that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I'll do that as well. We can just work on the charcoal ones.
Okay,
I'll shift the camera again.
okay.
Let me just change it to my document camera. There we go. This one of mine has actually worked out. It's quite a strange looking one. And it's quite weird because the kiddies marker and then I think this is the Neo color. It's almost gone like a resist. So it's
Huh.
I mean I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
So I'll draw into that as well and then see what it does. But yeah, it's like you said, it's always a good thing to experiment because you never know what's going to come out of it.
Yeah, really.
My charcoal one down here, and this is the one that I thought I messed up. But I'll go back now and just see if I can rescue bits of it. So maybe the Neo color, the white Neo color might work here, rescuing bits of this. Yeah, it does look like it's going to work. So that's quite nice on the charcoal. Neo color is new to me as well. I tend not to use pastels or crayons. I think I've always preferred more materials that are a little bit more refined, like sharper points. And
Yeah.
I've been a bit nervous of using something that's as thick as a crayon. But I mean, I think it's quite good for you every now and again, to loosen up and not. It is quite. You're right, especially at the bottom. It has got that lovely soft texture to it. I'm just happy I've recovered from that horrible flu I had to cancel the last session just because I was feeling really rotten. So I'm working a bit of Inktense into this as well. So this has got a bit of neopastel and a bit of Inktense. It's going to be interesting to see when I add a little bit of water, what it does. We've got like 4 minutes. I'm going to quickly add water and see what it does. The charcoals worked quite well. And in combination with the other media, I think it's
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see to do it. I mean, I must try it maybe on white paper and see what it does as well. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for attending tonight, and yeah, have a good day, the rest, and have a good week. Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.